Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Let's just go through what we're going to be making today. So this is with the drum stem included. We're not going to be making the drums, but we will be making the kick. And as you can see, it's a composite kind of 808. It's got 5 or 6 layers. So when someone says an 808, they normally mean a bass which is inspired by the Roland TR-808 drum machine. This was a piece of hardware that was released in 1980 and didn't perform very well commercially, and production stopped in 1983. However, it's had a massive impact on music. So this original drum machine, it had a kick drum, which was essentially a bass note, and that's what we know it as today. But with 808s, a bass on its own isn't really going to cut it. It kind of needs a bit of a transient to go with it. It needs a kick alongside it. Sometimes you'll have an 808 that has a sound built into it, like a noise or a transient, a higher element. Or you'll see in this song, it's actually got several layers that keeps it really punchy as well as that really sustaining bass. So Katy Perry's song Dark Horse, which is quite old, it's from 2013, it's got this really great 808. It really makes the song, for me, it's just the ultimate. It was produced by Max Martin and Circuit and Dr. Luke. And it was a #1 hit in 4 countries, but not the UK. So to make this, I had the stems, which I got from Club Remixer. To access their stems on their database, they've got loads of them. You have to be a subscriber to their Patreon page for £9 a month, but it gives you access to loads of stuff. It's a really great educational resource for producers. So I just loaded up these stems into a Logic project, and then I've just been studying them, listening through them, analysing them with various different tools, looking at the EQ, the dynamic range, the stereo spread, things like that. It's one of the best ways you can learn as a producer. For this tutorial, you'll definitely want to use headphones. There's a lot of low frequency content that's just not going to be reproduced on a phone very well, especially like the sub kick, the sub 808, that kind of thing. Right, let's go into it. So if I play without the drum stems, this is what it sounds like. So the first thing we're going to make is this sub 808. So this is the foundation of it, it's the low frequency. And then we're going to embellish it with some other stuff to make it hit more. So we have A#1 or a B flat, just in this rhythm, and the notes are all joined up. So the rhythm is playing, but you can't really hear it as it is. It's basically just a very long note. We'll divide it up later using ShaperBox, or you could use Kickstart, something like that. So Serum, this is a very basic synth. So we've just got a sub and we've just put in the note that we actually want. We're not going to mess around with the octave, and it's just hardly anything going on. Envelope 1 is controlling the level a little bit, and we've got this 18 millisecond attack that helps to reduce some of the clicking you get with, especially with low frequencies. If you don't have enough attack or release, both of them are important, you can get this clicking, which isn't very nice. There's essentially nothing to that, the sub. In the lower frequencies, at the very bottom of the frequency spectrum, there's not much room for movement. You can't really be creative down there because sounds take such a long time to speak. No effects at all. The gain is just, I think I've just balanced the volume a little bit there, and I've made it mono. Then all I'm doing here is, I think there is still a little bit of clicking coming from this. It's very hard to get rid of sometimes with bass sounds. I think it's more to do with the release than the attack, which might sound a bit counterintuitive, but I'm just cutting it off here. I'm not really sure why I've put the rhythms in there, because it's not actually doing anything. You can't hear any rhythms. And as you can see, it's just one frequency spike. There's no overtones or anything like that. It's pretty much a pure tone. So the next layer, if we listen on its own, much more complex layer. It's just adding richness into the 808 bass sound. Let's have a listen. It doesn't sound very good on its own, and I've put in a 5th, so it does sound a bit weird, but it's going to be very low in volume compared to the sub. So in context, it should sound nice. So another instance of Serum. So this one is doing the fundamental, and then this one is a fifth higher. And both of them are an octave higher than the sub. So we've got this basic shape, both essentially sine waves, but slightly more detailed. You get a bit more richness if the sine wave isn't completely pure. In this envelope, again, we've got 18 milliseconds of attack. The other settings don't really matter so much, as long as you have a little bit of a release so it doesn't click. The other thing I've done is just change the waveform a little bit of oscillator B, just so it makes it more interesting, a little bit more movement in the sound. So if I bypass that, let's have a listen. So it's a little bit more interesting. And then the other thing is a little bit of pitch modulation. Oscillator A has a tiny bit of pitch modulation, so just at the start with this envelope 3, so you just drag that onto the fine pitch, and it's just gonna warp the pitch a little bit right at the start of the note. So it's just gonna move very slightly. And I've put this filter on it in the EQ, so low 18 filter, filtering both of them, and the cutoff is at 295 Hertz. So let's just look what we've got with the EQ. There is that fifth element which adds a bit of richness. It's a bit more audible than a fifth would normally be in the harmonic series. Both the sub 808 and the regular 808 are being fed into a bus. And then I've got Saturn on here. Just a tiny little bit of distortion here to glue it together a bit. So without... Right, so that sounds dreadful, as it is. So what I'm going to do next is feed it through ShaperBox to control the volume and make a little bit of space at the start of each note for the kick. Go over here, stereo out, and I'll put no output. And then I've got this track here, so it's a MIDI track, and I've loaded ShaperBox 3 as the instrument, so not as an insert. And then you just open it up and click the sidechain button and select your bus, so bus 25 for me. So I'm just shaping the volume here so it ducks down for the kick. I've got it synced to 1 bar, so as you can see, this is where the waveform is going to be shaped. It's not being done in the instrument at all. So it will just die away very slightly as the note goes on. And ShaperBox has worked out that it's approximately 60%, it's 40% quieter than it would be otherwise. So as you can see, the original bus, even though there's no output, is very, very loud. But when it's going through ShaperBox, so let me take all that off. So just on its own with the volume shaping. So now we've got the rhythm back, which is great. And also you can hear on the longer note, this one here, which spans across the bar, you can hear it sort of dies away a little bit more. A tiny bit, just a tiny bit. And you can see that on the original stem, that it's a very, very compressed sound. It's a very flat waveform. So ShaperBox, controlling volume there, Pro Q, just emphasizing, just pulled out a band there, and then Pro L, compressing, flattening out even more, really compressed bass sound. And I believe this is a completely mono sound, yeah, minus 9.7, so just taking the volume down. You can do this, of course, with Pro L, so you could just put the output in there, but I prefer not to do that because I like to see this little red graphic to show you how much it's actually doing. So that's the bass element of it. Now let's move on to the kick. So the first thing is this sub kick, which I have made in Kick 2, which is my new favorite plugin. You can really craft exactly what you want. If you have the stems for a track that you really like, in a genre that you want to work in, you can have a look at it and then try to recreate something similar. So you've got all these different, this is like a sample player, these click 1, click 2, click 3. Okay, so we've got this tiny little click here. Apparently there's a click there. I can't actually hear that, I don't know if you can. So there's the pitch envelope, which is going to the same note as the bass, and then we've got this amp. And this graphic is actually logarithmic. This is probably the only thing I don't like about this plugin, is that this is really confusing. So this area here is actually about half of the sound. So with this tutorial, I'm really just going to blast through it and show you all the different elements. If you want to look in more detail, you can look on my website. You can buy the Logic project, the channel strip settings, patches, everything, sim preset, kick 2 presets, all of that if you really want to dig deep into it. So that's just something I made. And then, okay, so making it louder with some gain, some stereo spread, just the very top. So if we look on metric AB, we can just see the very top frequencies are slightly not mono, slightly tiny bit of spread there. So about 10K it starts to spread, and I think that makes a really big difference if it's just not completely mono. So this stereo spread plugin is just adding that. You can also, whatever click you have here, if you just load up a transient that already has some stereo spread in, that's a good way of getting it in there. And then I'm limiting here, just the tiniest little bit, which is just going to control the volume to the exact level you want. So the next thing is this kick, which is going to be embedded into the 808. So from looking at the stems, it had different kicks, different layers of kicks, and there was one embedded in the 808, which was very much like a knocking sound. So not much bass frequency, very much the mid-range, sort of like 100 to 500 in that ballpark. So I got this knocking sound from the internet for free somewhere, and I've just made it quite short and put it into the quick sampler, into the quick sampler. All of these are exactly the same. The MIDI is exactly the same in all of them. I've just got it to maybe different notes. Yeah, okay, so this one's C4. It's not following the pitch. Pro Q taking off some of the high end. Oh, okay, right, so let's listen on its own without any processing. So it's just someone knocking on a door. Enveloper, adding some attack and making it even shorter. Not cutting it off, but just lowering the volume of the tail part of the sample. And making it 17 dB quieter for some reason. It gets really confusing with all these plugins because everything's just turning the volume up and down and up and down, and then it's very hard to keep track of. Direction mixer. So this is just reducing the stereo spread in the lower frequencies. So if you keep this at 1, it does absolutely nothing. But then if you turn on the split, I've set the crossover at 5K, and then if you draw this into 0, then the lower part will be completely mono. You can do this other ways. You can do it in Pro Q, set it to mid-side, and then just cut the frequencies on the sides, or you can do it that way. There's multiple ways to do it, but it's essentially the same thing. Then I've got this stereo spread, and this is making everything above 2K, that's a bit weird, more spread, adding some details. So let's have a look in metric AB. So it's around 1K, it starts to get some stereo spread, and that's just going to add. All of this stuff builds up every time you have a track. If it's slightly more stereo, apart from the key elements, which probably need to be mono, so like the main part of the kick, the bass, the vocals, maybe the snare. If that's all completely mono, that's great. Your track's going to sound great when you play it on a phone or home assistant device, which is mono. But everything else kind of needs to be stereo spread, and that adds up to having a really wide track. So the next thing, we've got another Pro Q. So just a bit of tone shaping there. Pitch shift. So this is just going to make it all a bit more interesting. So I've automated this. Let's hear without it. So you can see this sense, which is, I think there's 100 cents in a semitone. So if it's 50 cents out of tune, it's halfway between one of the keys on the piano. And I'm just automating it, so you can see it jumping around. And that's just gonna add a little bit of interest with the pitch there. I did try by using different notes on this. I thought it was too much, so I'm just going to keep the notes the same. Pitch shift, so just on these notes, you can't see the notes very well, but they're under here, so I've just automated it so these are moving between. So when the kick isn't playing, the pitch shift is going to move. Just these little subtle details just make it a bit more interesting. So it's not like a robotic, just the same sound again and again and again, because that gets really dull. And then we've got gain, again, just moving the volume up and down. So the kick and the sub together, these are going into a bus again. Let's hear them together without the processing. So it sounds a lot better, I think, together. Let's put a bit in EQ. So together these sounds are very full. That sounds a bit more like a regular kick to me. And that is done. So together they sound like this. Pretty cool. And with the original drum stem, have I really shown everything? Is that it? And that is all there is to it. If you do want more detail, do check out the project. You can download the project on my website, have a look in more detail. While you're there, do check out my book, Make It Pop. If you want to get better at music production, it's just a rundown of all the things you can do to improve your techniques. So that's it for this week. Please do subscribe, it'd really help me out. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram. Check out my website, check out my book. Thanks very much.